He walked in as Barron Trump, son of a president. He left as just Barron, a young man forever changed. In the span of a few hours, Barron Trump's life took an unexpected turn. What happened inside that community center? The answer reveals a side of the Trump family you've never seen before. A quiet Tuesday afternoon at the Helping Hands Community Center took an unexpected turn. The worn doors creaked open, revealing a tall, slender figure silhouetted against the bright sunlight outside. As the visitor stepped inside, the fluorescent lights flickered, illuminating a face that seemed oddly familiar to everyone in the room. The staff members froze, their eyes widening as recognition dawned. Barron Trump stood awkwardly in the center of the room, his designer shoes a stark contrast to the scuffed linoleum floor beneath his feet. The air seemed to thicken with tension as everyone held their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. As Barron shifted his weight nervously, a small child, oblivious to the visitor's identity, tugged at his sleeve. The room fell silent, all eyes fixed on this unlikely pair. To everyone's surprise, Barron knelt down, meeting the child's eyes. His tall frame folded awkwardly as he tried to make himself smaller, less intimidating. "Hi, I'm Barron," he said softly, his voice cracking slightly. "What's your name?" The little girl proudly declared her name was Lily, and showed Barron her favorite stuffed animal, a well-loved teddy bear missing an eye. Barron listened intently as Lily regaled him with stories about her toy's adventures. As the initial shock wore off, the center's director, Miss Johnson, approached Barron. "Mr. Trump," she began, her voice barely above a whisper, "we weren't expecting... how can we help you today?" Barron stood up, his cheeks flushing slightly. I wanted to see for myself, to understand what goes on here, if that's okay." Miss Johnson nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. "Of course, we'd be happy to show you around." As they toured the center, Barron's initial nervousness seemed to melt away. He engaged with the children they encountered, listening to their stories and dreams with genuine interest. In the art room, he sat down at a table covered in colorful drawings and began to sketch alongside a group of giggling kids. Passing by a classroom, Barron paused, watching as a volunteer patiently explained a math problem to a frustrated student. Without prompting, he asked, "Do you have enough tutors for all the kids who need help?" Miss Johnson's face fell slightly. "We do our best, but there's always a need for more volunteers, especially for subjects like math and science." Something in Barron's demeanor shifted. He squared his shoulders and said, "I'm pretty good at math. Maybe I could help out sometime?" The offer hung in the air, unexpected and sincere. Miss Johnson blinked rapidly, trying to process what she had just heard. "That would be wonderful," she managed to say, her voice thick with emotion. As the afternoon wore on, the initial strangeness of Barron's presence faded. He became just another visitor, albeit one with an unusually keen interest in the center's operations and the people it served. He asked about funding challenges, listened to stories of families struggling to make ends meet, and witnessed firsthand the dedication of the staff and volunteers. One little boy, noticing Barron's height, asked if he played basketball. Barron laughed and admitted he wasn't very good at sports. "But," he added with a grin, "I bet I could teach you some cool magic tricks if you're interested." The children's eyes lit up at the prospect, and soon Barron was surrounded by an eager audience as he demonstrated a simple coin trick. The sound of laughter and excited chatter filled the room, drawing curious onlookers from other parts of the center. As the day drew to a close, Barron found himself reflecting on the stark contrast between his privileged upbringing and the realities faced by the families who relied on the community center. The experience had touched him in ways he hadn't expected, and as he prepared to leave, he knew this visit was just the beginning of a new chapter in his life. As Barron ventured deeper into the community center, the stark reality of poverty hit him with unexpected force. The cheerful laughter of children echoed through the halls, but beneath the surface, a sobering truth waited to be uncovered. With each step, the young man's eyes were open to a world he'd never truly seen before, challenging everything he thought he knew about life in America. The walls told a story of neglect and struggle. Faded posters hung at odd angles, their curled edges whispering tales of forgotten dreams. Chipped paint peeled away in long strips, exposing the bare drywall beneath like layers of hope stripped away over time. The air carried a faint, musty odor, a reminder of the building's constant battle against decay. Barron's gaze fell upon a group of children huddled around a single, outdated computer. Their eyes sparkled with excitement as they took turns navigating an educational game, oblivious to the outdated technology they were using. For a moment, Barron's mind flashed to his own room, filled with the latest gadgets and multiple high-end devices. The contrast was jarring, and a pang of guilt shot through him. A young girl caught his attention, her small frame swimming in an oversized hand-me-down sweater. But it was her feet that made Barron's heart clench. The girl wore a pair of scuffed sneakers that were clearly several sizes too big, her tiny steps careful and measured to keep them from slipping off. The smell of food drew Barron towards the cafeteria. As he stepped inside, his stomach churned, but not from hunger. The meager offerings laid out on the serving line were a far cry from the lavish meals he was accustomed to. A thin soup, a small portion of overcooked vegetables, and a slice of bread. This was meant to be a full meal for growing children. A volunteer noticed Barron's expression and approached him. "We do our best with what we have," she explained, her voice tinged with a mixture of pride and resignation. "But it's a constant struggle to provide even the basics. Some of these kids, this might be the only real meal they get all day." The weight of her words settled heavily on Barron's shoulders. He thought of the fully stocked pantry at home, the personal chef always ready to whip up whatever he desired. The stark difference between his life and the lives of these children felt like a physical ache in his chest. As the tour continued, Barron found himself struggling to maintain his composure. Each new revelation, the shortage of school supplies, the worn-out playground equipment, the makeshift clothing donation area, hit him like a punch to the gut. His hands trembled slightly as he realized the true magnitude of the need before him. The staff member leading the tour, a kind-faced woman named Sarah, seemed to sense Barron's growing distress. She paused their walk, turning to face him with a gentle smile. "It can be overwhelming, I know," she said softly, "but every little bit of help makes a difference. These kids are resilient, and with support, they can overcome so much." Barron nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in his throat. He looked around the room, taking in the smiling faces of the children, the dedication of the volunteers, and the palpable sense of community, despite the hardships. Something shifted inside him, a resolve taking root where uncertainty had been just moments before. "What can I do to help?" The words tumbled out of Barron's mouth, barely above a whisper. His voice gained strength as he repeated the question, meeting Sarah's eyes with newfound determination. "Please, tell me what I can do. There must be something." Sarah exchanged surprised glances with a nearby volunteer. The sincerity in Barron's eyes was unmistakable, a far cry from the aloof teenager they might have expected. For a moment, the bustling activity of the center seemed to fade away, leaving only the connection between a young man awakening to the world's harsh realities and those who had long been fighting to make a difference. Barron's heart raced as he approached the group of children hunched over their homework. Their threadbare clothes and scuffed shoes told stories of struggle he was only beginning to understand. For a moment he hesitated, wondering if he had made a mistake. But then, something caught his eye. On the table in front of a small boy with unruly hair lay a familiar math workbook. It was the same one Barron had used years ago. In that moment, the world seemed to shrink, and Barron found an unexpected bridge between his life and theirs. "Hey," Barron said softly. "Is it okay if I join you guys?" The children exchanged glances. After what felt like an eternity, the boy with the math book gave a small nod. Pulling up a chair, Barron settled in beside the group. "I used to have trouble with fractions too," he admitted, pointing to a challenging problem. The admission cracked the ice. A girl with braids leaned in, her eyes bright. "Really? But you're, rich and stuff. I thought rich kids were good at everything." Barron chuckled, tension easing. "Trust me, being rich doesn't make you automatically smart. But I learned some cool tricks. Want to see?" What happened next transformed the room. Barron shared mnemonic devices and visualization techniques. He turned multiplication tables into a game. Soon, giggles and excited chatter filled the air. As Barron helped a young girl named Maria, he noticed her shoes' pink sneakers 2 sizes too big, laces frayed and knotted. The sight made his throat tighten, but he focused on Maria's growing smile as the numbers started to make sense. Across the table, a boy named Tyler watched with interest. "Hey, rich kid," he called out. "Think you're so smart? Let's have a multiplication race." The room fell silent. Barron felt the weight of expectations. For a split second, he considered declining, but the earnest look in Tyler's eyes made the decision for him. "You're on," Barron said with a grin. Miss Johnson stepped forward to officiate. First one to correctly solve all 10 problems wins. Ready, set, go. Pencils flew. Children cheered. Barron's hand moved swiftly, years of tutoring giving him an edge. But Tyler's intense focus impressed him. Something shifted in Barron. The desire to win faded, replaced by admiration for Tyler's grit. As they neared the end, Barron slowed his pace. "Done!" Tyler shouted triumphantly. Miss Johnson checked both worksheets. "Well, I'll be," she said warmly. "Tyler, you've done it. All correct, and you finished first." The room erupted. Tyler's face lit up with joy. Barron stood, hand extended for a high five. "That was amazing, Tyler," Barron said, his voice filled with sincere admiration. "You've got some serious math skills." As their hands met, something intangible crumbled. The invisible wall separating Barron from these children began to dissolve. Laughter filled the air as others crowded around, eager to challenge Barron or show off their own math prowess. A haunting melody drifted through the community center, silencing conversations and drawing curious gazes. In a forgotten corner, a battered upright piano stood like a silent sentinel, its keys yellowed and wood scratched from years of neglect. The worn ivory seemed to whisper of hidden potential, waiting to be awakened. Barron felt drawn to the instrument, his fingers itching to caress the keys. He hesitated, suddenly aware of how out of place he felt in this unfamiliar world. The piano called to him, a familiar friend in a sea of strangers, but fear held him back. A small girl with braids and bright eyes noticed Barron's longing gaze. She tugged gently on his sleeve, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you know how to play?" Barron nodded, a shy smile tugging at his lips. The girl's eyes lit up with excitement. "Will you play for us? Please?" The request hung in the air, expectations settling on Barron's shoulders. He glanced around, seeing curious faces turned toward him. With a deep breath, he made his way to the piano bench, his designer shoes squeaking softly on the worn linoleum floor. As Barron sat down, the room fell silent. He placed his hands on the keys, feeling the cool smoothness beneath his fingertips. For a moment, he was back in his family's penthouse, practicing under his instructor's watchful eye. The first notes of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major filled the room. The melody, both melancholic and hopeful, wove a spell over the crowd. Children and staff drew closer, mesmerized by the unexpected concert. As Barron played, something within him shifted. The tension melted away, his face transformed with passion. His fingers danced across the keys, coaxing forth a sound that belied the piano's battered appearance. The music swelled and ebbed, filling every corner with its haunting beauty. In that moment, the differences between Barron and the children faded away. They were lost in the universal language of music, bound by the emotions it evoked. Young ones swayed to the rhythm, while older children closed their eyes, letting the melody wash over them. Miss Johnson watched from the back, her hand pressed to her heart. She saw the young man she had initially viewed as an outsider become a bridge, connecting two worlds through his music. Tears glistened in her eyes as she realized the profound impact of this moment. As the final notes faded, a breathless silence fell. Then, as if a spell had broken, thunderous applause erupted, children cheered, their faces alight with joy and wonder. Staff members wiped away tears, moved by the unexpected gift. Barron blushed deeply, realizing he had shared a part of himself usually hidden from the world. In his everyday life, he was Barron Trump, son of a former president, often overshadowed by his famous family. But here, in this humble community center, he was simply Barron, a talented pianist who had brought beauty to a group of strangers. The little girl who had first asked him to play bounced up to the piano, her eyes shining. "That was amazing!" she exclaimed. "Can you teach me to play like that?" Barron's blush deepened, but a genuine smile spread across his face. "It takes a lot of practice," he said softly, "but I'd be happy to show you a few things." As he began to show the girl a simple melody, other children gathered around, eager to learn. The once forgotten piano became the center of attention, a symbol of unexpected connections being forged in that moment. As the impromptu piano lesson wound down, Barron found himself drawn to a small office tucked away in the corner of the community center. Miss Johnson, the center's tireless director, gestured for him to take a seat in a creaky chair. "Coffee?" she offered, reaching for a chipped mug. Barron nodded, his eyes drawn to the stack of papers on Miss Johnson's desk, their bold red lettering impossible to ignore. "Are those bills?" he asked, a heaviness settling in his chest. A weary smile crossed Miss Johnson's face as she sank into her chair. "Always," she replied. "Running this place is a constant battle against the bottom line. Every month it's a juggling act to keep the lights on and the programs running." Barron listened intently as Miss Johnson detailed the center's financial struggles. She spoke of grants that never quite covered enough, of donations that trickled in too slowly, and of the constant fear that one day they might have to close their doors for good. "But we can't give up," she said, her voice filled with quiet determination. "These kids, these families, they need us. For some, we're the only stability they have in their lives." As Miss Johnson continued, Barron thought of his own bank account, filled with money he had never earned, never truly appreciated. The stark contrast between his world and the one he had stepped into today hit him with the force of a physical blow. His hand trembled slightly as he reached for his phone. "Miss Johnson," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'd like to make a call, if that's all right." She nodded, curiosity evident in her eyes as Barron stepped out into the hallway. The sounds of children laughing echoed around him as he dialed a number he rarely used. When the voice on the other end answered, Barron took a deep breath and began to speak. Minutes ticked by, feeling like hours. When Barron finally returned to the office, Miss Johnson looked up from her paperwork, a question in her eyes. "I hope you don't mind," Barron began, his voice slightly unsteady, "but I've just arranged for an anonymous donation to be made to the center." Miss Johnson's eyes widened, her pen clattering to the desk. "A donation?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. Barron nodded, a small smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "It should be enough to cover your operating costs for the next year, with some left over for improvements and new programs." The room fell silent. The only sound, the distant laughter of children. Miss Johnson's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears as the magnitude of Barron's gesture sank in. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice choked with emotion. It's beyond anything I could have imagined. You have no idea what this means for us, for the children." Barron felt a warmth spreading through his chest, a feeling so different from anything he had experienced before. This was something deeper, more real. "I think I'm starting to understand," he said softly, his gaze drifting to the window where he could see children playing in the fading light. "And I'd like to do more. Not just money, but time. If you'll have me, I'd like to keep volunteering here." Miss Johnson's tears flowed freely now, but her smile was radiant. "Barron," she said, reaching out to clasp his hand, "you will always have a place here. What you've done today, it's about more than money. You've given us hope. You've shown these kids that they matter, that their dreams are worth investing in." As the reality of what he had done settled over him, Barron felt something shift inside. The world he had known, with its gilded cages and hollow pleasures, seemed to recede. Here, in this small, shabby office, he had found something real, something that mattered. Miss Johnson arrived at the center the day after Barron's visit to find an unexpected sight. A line of people stretched down the block, each holding something in their hands. Confused, she approached the first person, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes. "I heard about what a penned yesterday," the woman said, her voice filled with emotion. "I've lived here for years but never stepped inside. I want to help." As Miss Johnson unlocked the doors, a flood of people poured in. Some carried groceries, others held books, and a few even brought gently used computers. The center, always struggling to make ends meet, suddenly brimmed with resources. Word of Barron's visit had spread through the community like wildfire. Social media buzzed with stories of the young man's kindness, inspiring others to act. Local businesses reached out to offer support. The corner bakery promised fresh bread every morning, while a nearby tech company pledged to set up a small computer lab. Even the local hardware store owner arrived, tool belt in hand, ready to fix anything in need of repair. The children couldn't stop talking about their special visitor. To them, Barron wasn't just a former president's son. He was a real-life prince who had stepped out of a fairy tale to brighten their world. Their excitement spread to their families and friends, drawing more people to the center. "Mommy, did you hear?" little Lily asked, bouncing on her toes. "A prince came to our center. He played piano and did magic tricks." The children's enthusiasm sparked something in their parents. Families who had hesitated to seek help before now felt a renewed sense of hope. Within weeks, the center's attendance doubled. Miss Johnson scrambled to accommodate the influx, but she couldn't have been happier about it. At Barron's school, the impact rippled through the hallways. His classmates, many who had never given much thought to community service, buzzed with ideas. A group approached their teacher with a proposal for a school-wide fundraiser. If Barron can make such a big difference, one student argued, why can't we? The fundraiser succeeded beyond expectations, raising thousands for the center and other local charities. More importantly, it ignited a passion for service in young people who had previously felt disconnected from their community. As days passed, Miss Johnson fielded calls from reporters eager for details about Barron's visit. She protected his privacy, refusing to divulge information or allow cameras inside. Her loyalty didn't go unnoticed. 1 month later, a crisp, white envelope arrived at the center. Miss Johnson's hands shook as she opened it, revealing an official White House letterhead. The letter praised the center's work and its impact on the community. While it didn't mention Barron by name, the implications were clear. The center had become a beacon of hope. Families who once felt invisible now stood tall, empowered by the knowledge that someone, even from a world so different from their own, had seen them and cared. Local politicians, who had long overlooked the center, suddenly found reasons to visit. They spoke of increased funding and support, though Miss Johnson remained cautiously optimistic. The true change wasn't coming from the top down. It bubbled up from within the community itself. People who had never interacted before now worked side by side, united in their desire to make their neighborhood better. One evening, as Miss Johnson locked up, she overheard two volunteers talking. You know, one said, I always thought it would take some big government program or a millionaire's donation to fix things around here. But look at what one kid's visit did. The other nodded, adding, it's like that old saying about how a single stone can start an avalanche. Who would have thought that stone would be a teenager in designer shoes? Barron's quiet act of kindness at Helping Hands Community Center ignited a transformation that touched hearts across the nation. What began as a simple visit blossomed into a movement, inspiring people from all walks of life to take action in their communities. The young man who once felt overshadowed by his famous family had found his own light. Barron's journey from privileged observer to active participant wasn't just about changing one community center, it was about changing himself. He discovered a sense of purpose that no amount of wealth or status could provide. In the end, Barron's most valuable lesson came from the smiles of children he helped and the gratitude of families he supported. His story became a testament to the power of stepping outside one's comfort zone and truly seeing the world through others' eyes. What small act of kindness could you spark today?